It's Sunday, February 8th, 2026, and we're tracking a meteorological setup that could reshape the rest of winter across the eastern United States. A dangerous baroclinic zone is forming right now as milder Pacific energy begins to clash with the entrenched Arctic air that's been locked over the east for weeks. This temperature contrast is creating the perfect breeding ground for powerful winter storms, and we're already seeing the first signs of what could be a very active pattern through at least Valentine's Day. In the next several minutes, I'm going to break down why this baroclinic zone is so significant, how it's going to fuel multiple Alberta clipper systems over the coming weeks, and why February 2026 could end up being one of the snowiest on record for cities like Washington, D.C. and New York. Let's start with what's happening right now. The current weather pattern is being dominated by what meteorologists call a displaced polar vortex, combined with a rapidly weakening La Niña in the Pacific Ocean. This combination has essentially opened the Arctic floodgates, allowing wave after wave of brutally cold air to spill deep into the United States. But here's where it gets really interesting. Out west, we have a massive ridge of high pressure that has kept California and Colorado essentially snow-starved for much of this winter season. However, this same ridge is now acting like a slide, pushing milder Pacific air directly toward the entrenched cold air mass over the Midwest and eastern seaboard. When these two vastly different air masses meet, they create what we call a baroclinic zone. Think of it as nature's perfect storm factory. The sharp temperature contrast between the relatively mild Pacific air and the bitter Arctic air creates instability in the atmosphere that can rapidly spawn storm systems. We're not talking about weak disturbances here. These baroclinic zones are capable of producing intense winter storms with heavy snow, strong winds, and rapid intensification that can catch even experienced forecasters off guard. The National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center has been closely monitoring this setup, and their latest forecast shows just how dangerous this pattern could become. They're warning that the Arctic air mass will persist over the eastern Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast through at least Sunday, with temperatures running 20 to 30 degrees below normal. But it's not just the cold that's concerning meteorologists. It's what happens when that Pacific energy starts to interact with all this cold air. We're already seeing the first evidence of this pattern playing out. A fast-moving Alberta clipper system moved through the Great Lakes and Northeast yesterday and today, bringing powerful wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour and additional snow accumulations to regions that are already well above their average winter totals. Over 42 million people across the region are currently under wind alerts, and the combination of fresh snow and these dangerous winds is creating blowing snow conditions that can reduce visibility to near zero in a matter of seconds. Now here's what makes this setup particularly dangerous for travel and daily life. Much of the snow from January's historic winter storm Fern that dropped double-digit accumulations from Texas to Maine is still on the ground. In the Northeast, this old snow has turned into what meteorologists are calling snowcrete, a dense, ice-packed layer that's not melting quickly in the persistent cold. When you add new snow on top of this snowcrete, you're creating dangerous roof load conditions for buildings and extremely treacherous conditions for pedestrians and vehicles. Looking ahead at the pattern evolution, long-range models are showing that this baroclinic zone is going to remain active through at least the middle of February, possibly extending even longer. The key period that forecasters are watching closely is between February 10th and Valentine's Day. During this time frame, the warm air currently sitting over the western United States will attempt to push eastward more aggressively. While warm might sound like good news to people who are tired of the cold, it actually sets the stage for potentially explosive storm development. Here's how this is likely to play out across different regions. For the northern and central plains, we can expect repeated bursts of heavy, dry snow as clipper systems race through the temperature contrast zone. These systems move fast, but they can drop significant snow totals in a short period of time. For the Midwest and Great Lakes region, we're looking at what meteorologists call repeated clipper systems that will bring accumulating snow on a regular basis. The pattern favors these fast-moving disturbances that can quickly develop along the temperature boundary and then race eastward. But it's in the northeast corridor where things could get really interesting. The potential for what's called a lee-side cyclone could turn what starts as a modest weather disturbance into a major snow event for New England. Lee-side cyclones form when air flows over the Appalachian Mountains and then rapidly develops into a storm system on the eastern side of the mountain range. When you combine this topographic effect with a strong baroclinic zone, you have all the ingredients for rapid storm intensification. For specific cities, the forecast is particularly concerning for the Interstate 95 corridor. Washington, D.C. historically sees its snowiest weather in February, and all the meteorological signals are pointing toward 2026, following that tradition with predicted totals of 3 to 7 inches for the month. That might not sound like a lot, but remember, this is on top of what the city has already received, and these totals could easily be exceeded if we see 1 or 2 major storms develop along the baroclinic zone. New York City is also in the crosshairs for potentially significant snow events. The city could see additional accumulations of 1 to 3 inches from each clipper system, and if a stronger storm develops, we could be looking at much higher totals. The key factor will be the exact track of these systems and how much they can tap into the moisture from the Atlantic Ocean as they move up the coast. Boston and the rest of New England are particularly vulnerable to the lee-side cyclone development I mentioned earlier. If one of these systems can organize properly as it moves over the mountains and then intensify over the relatively warm Atlantic waters, we could see a significant nor'easter impact the region. The combination of heavy snow, strong winds, and coastal flooding would make this a high-impact event. The pattern is also raising concerns about infrastructure and emergency preparedness across the affected regions. Power companies are already on high alert because the combination of heavy, wet snow and strong winds creates prime conditions for tree damage and power outages. When you factor in the extreme cold that will follow each storm system, any power outages become a serious public safety concern. Transportation infrastructure is also at risk. Airlines have already begun issuing travel advisories for the coming weeks, with major carriers like Delta, United, and American waiving change fees for flights that could be affected by winter weather. The combination of snow, wind, and cold creates multiple challenges for aviation operations, from equipment issues in extreme temperatures to runway clearing difficulties. Road travel presents its own set of challenges in this pattern. The repeated snow events mean that road crews will be constantly working to clear highways and local roads. But with temperatures remaining well below freezing, any snow that gets compacted quickly turns to ice, creating hazardous driving conditions that can persist for days or even weeks. From an economic perspective, this pattern is going to put significant stress on energy markets and heating systems across the affected regions. Natural gas demand is already running well above seasonal norms due to the persistent cold, and utility companies are preparing for potentially record-breaking heating loads as the pattern continues. The combination of extreme cold and potential power outages from winter storms creates a perfect storm for energy system stress. Agricultural interests are also watching this pattern closely. The persistent cold and repeated snow events could impact winter wheat crops and delay spring planting preparations across the Midwest and Plains states. Livestock operations are facing increased costs for heating and feed, as animals require more calories to maintain body temperature in the extreme cold. Looking at the broader climate pattern, this baroclinic zone development is occurring against the backdrop of a rapidly changing global weather pattern. La Niña conditions in the Pacific Ocean are weakening much faster than originally predicted, with most models now showing a transition to neutral conditions by late February or early March. This transition period often brings increased weather variability and can allow high-latitude patterns like the displaced polar vortex to dominate regional weather patterns. The weakening La Niña is also contributing to the persistence of the western ridge that's helping to fuel this baroclinic zone. Normally, La Niña conditions would favor a more active storm track across the northern United States, but the rapid weakening means that the atmospheric pattern is becoming less constrained by tropical forcing. This allows the polar vortex disruption and the resulting temperature contrasts to play a bigger role in day-to-day weather patterns. For emergency preparedness, now is the time to finalize winter weather plans if you haven't already. This pattern favors rapid storm development and intensification, which means conditions can deteriorate quickly with little warning. Make sure you have adequate emergency supplies, including food, water, flashlights, batteries, and backup heating sources. If you're in an area prone to power outages, consider having a generator. But remember that generators must always be operated outdoors to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning. Travel planning becomes particularly important in this pattern. The rapid development of storms along the baroclinic zone means that weather conditions can change dramatically in a matter of hours. If you have travel plans in the coming weeks, build in extra time and have backup options available. Monitor weather forecasts closely and be prepared to adjust or cancel travel if conditions deteriorate. The bottom line is that we're entering what could be the most active and impactful phase of winter 2026. The baroclinic zone that's developing between Pacific energy and Arctic air masses creates a perfect setup for repeated winter storms, heavy snow events, and dangerous travel conditions. This isn't a typical late winter pattern where we start to see warming and storm activity decreases. Instead, we're looking at a pattern that could deliver some of the most significant winter weather events of the entire season. Stay tuned for frequent updates as this pattern evolves. We'll be tracking each Clipper system and potential major storm as they develop along this temperature boundary. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on because this is going to be a very active period with potentially rapid changes in the forecast. Bundle up, stay prepared, and we'll see you in the next update.